Welcome to Moving the World, the podcast from Prologis, where we dive into the innovations redefining how goods move around the globe. Today, Todd Lewis of Prologis Ventures sits down with Gina Chung of Locus Robotics. They break down how automation, AI, and real-time data are reshaping supply chains to be faster, smarter, end-to-end. Let's get moving.
Welcome, Gina. It's so great to see you again. And thank you for joining us on Moving the World.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, Todd.
Look, we're going to jump right into it. We've got a great topic today, and I'm so thrilled to be together with you, who has such an amazing background to speak at so many different levels of this topic, specifically around you've been on the buyer side and now on the build side, what it takes to create automation. So jumping right into state of today and how AI and robotics are no longer experiments and how they're transforming the modern supply chain as we know it. I would love to get your take on what you're seeing and the biggest shifts you're seeing for how these technologies are being deployed today across the world.
Yeah, it's a big question. I'm going to answer that by saying the biggest shift that I've seen in my career is just the scale and speed at which robotics and automation is being deployed in warehouses today. So for the listeners on the call, prior to my role at Locus, I was with DHL, and Todd, you were with UPS. So DHL, UPS, so largest logistics companies in the world. And I think you and I were both at those companies at the time when they were just starting to experiment with collaborative robotics and these kind of new age automation technologies. And back then, which wasn't too long ago, by the way, was less than 10 years ago, it was all about pilots and proof of concepts and engaging with vendors that you had never heard about before. And now, fast forward less than 10 years later, we're talking about, mass deployments of robotics across warehouses, vendors that have proven their ability to scale robotics, deliver productivity, deliver ROI. And the conversation of customers is no longer about, can we pilot at your warehouse A and warehouse B? They're pulling the trigger, not just in deploying robots at one warehouse, but deploying robots at multiple warehouses and even warehouses that aren't even built yet. I think that's one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing.
So it's crazy that you say that in that what I've seen over the past decade, right? The decade of staring at what has been a transformation in how we're looking at form factor to like what is a thoughtless effort for you and I for machinery is incredibly complex. And from a customer buying profile and the ability to scale it, we've gone from that FOMOing into pilots, right? Which is almost easy in nature of, I'm going to go meet these really exciting youthful companies and I'm going to go try to see if what they've said they can actually do. But the next step is actually a critical component, which is where I would consider it like the dip the toe methodology, where they might deploy 1, 2, 10 units across their supply chain or in a single warehouse. And this actually is by the amount of time it takes to adopt and scale automation. This one's one that, like, to me was always really fascinating because it's one that includes change management. And while I was at UPS, and as I look at customers today adopting technology, that moment of change management is not just, hey, we brought in Locus, we brought in Gideon, we brought in all these really exciting technologies, and we're just deploying them and they just work. It's actually fundamental in what operational changes do we need to make in order for this to be scalable across our enterprise. And that is something that I think our customers and their customers are uncovering in real time. And it takes more time. Yeah. So this whole like from pilot to the dipping the toe in the water is quick. The dipping the toe in the water to purchase and scale takes time because it's a fundamental reorganization behind how people have to set up their operations day to day and integrate humans into the loop behind how these systems will operate every day. So I love that call out from you. It's spot on and exciting, right? So on that note, it kind of leads me down a path of like, okay, we're in a world of real time, literally everything, right? So you have these essentially the smartest IoT machinery that's moving in or around these sophisticated facilities every single day. How do you see robotics and specifically around the data, driving efficiency gains. And if you could use any anecdotes from your time at Locus, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, let me give that some thought. So I think, robotics, people kind of can grasp the benefits of robotics, right? It's going to unlock productivity. It's going to help with accuracy. It's going to help with safety. But one of the interesting, additional benefits of deploying robotics is leveraging the data to drive better visibility, optimization, control of your warehouse and supply chain. So, I've been to, at this point, probably hundreds of warehouses around the world. And the funny thing is that a lot of warehouses have very limited visibility of what's actually going on the shop floor. Like, where are the people? Where are the carts? Where are the forklifts? Like, it's actually very difficult to have that visibility. But one of the things that we found out at DHL from the dozens of sites where we deployed robots is that the robot run warehouses had better visibility, control, and optimization opportunities because you had all of that data from the system. Like you mentioned with IoT devices, the robots are connected, you know where they are in the warehouse because the robots are interacting with people who also have an IoT tag. You also know where the labor is, and then you can use all of that data, the order data, inventory data to then optimize your warehouse and use that visibility in a way that just so many warehouses previously didn't have access to.
Okay, gonna be selfish here. A nerdy follow-up on that. What does it actually take to harness that data?
Yeah, I think the journey has been evolved for a company like Locus, right? So when you're just starting, launching a robotics company, you're very focused on getting your robots to work. So you're collecting a lot of data, the robots running around in the warehouse. You're using that data to improve the navigation, the path planning of the robot in the warehouse. But then over time, as our deployments have grown and grown, and we're at over 350 sites now, we had not just the data on the robots, the data that they're collecting as they're zooming around the warehouse, but we also have all of this data on the labor that's interacting with our robots, the associates interacting with our robots. We also have data on all of the order flows, orders that we receive from our customers' WMS. And we're able to take all of that data into what we've now built as a data lake at Locus to drive optimization. So that could come in the form of a recommendation to the customer that's using our system saying, hey, you might want to assign more labor from zone A to zone B because we're seeing a pickup in activity there. Or, hey, you might want to consider this size of fleet because, this is how your order profile has changed during the week or month. So those are just some of the ways that we're able to harness the data, put it into, a data lake, then drive the optimization through the specific algorithms that we've built to drive, better productivity for our customers.
It's one of the largest, I don't want to say I have many pet peeves, but when I think about recommendation-based and insight-based recommendations, it's fraught with this idea that all of these new forms of gathering data, we're building this surplus of information that unlocks recommendations around how we should be operationalizing our facility in real time. How far away are we from actually taking and just enabling action, right? Where the likes of a Locus or many others in the space can actually just in real time dictate, hey, this is what's best for your operations. You're setting the parameters, right? These users are going out and they're saying, this is what matters to us. These are the metrics that matter to our customers. But let's empower the Locuses of the world to use that data. And instead of just telling us like, hey, what should you do? Just optimize it.
Yeah, I think that some of the optimization already happens today to a certain extent, right? We get the order pool, we create tasks, we optimize it based on what we think is going to be the most efficient way to complete those orders. But then there's all sorts of pockets of opportunity to drive further optimization. So to your point about, instead of saying, hey, you should think about asking that worker to go to that aisle to pick with that robot, we're actually able to bring that action to the robot itself so that the picker is able to look at the robot and it'll actually say, hey, you should go to aisle 2 because there's going to be another robot arriving there. And that's going to be the most efficient next pick for you. So that's something that we're just in the process of piloting of several customers. We're calling it system directed labor. And again, it's only possible because of all of the advances in data and analytics that's happened in recent years.
I love that. But we're going to zoom out for a second and we're going to talk about hype versus reality, right? So a slight pivot, but into a category which I think for many of our listeners is something super exciting. It's top of mind. It's kind of tabloid in nature on the advent of humanoid robotics and where they actually fit in topics of conversation today and the reality behind the value they're driving and the value they could drive, right? So would love to get your take on what's flash and what's not. And are we are our customers or are your customers starting to lean in on that idea or not?
Well, let me first start with saying the technology that's being developed to try and make humanoids a reality, awesome. Like the software, the
Yeah.
AI, the breakthroughs and engineering hardware, love it. Follow it religiously, super cool. However,
So,
when we talk about humanoids in warehouses, I have a slightly different view of less rosier view of how humanoids will play out in the warehouse, and I'll explain a little bit about why I have some why I'm a little skeptical about humanoids scaling across warehouse environments. So, if you take a humanoid, the argument is you design it because the world is designed for humans, right? You need the legs to move up and down stairs, get in and out of cart. Makes sense. In a warehouse, the floors as flat as can be. If anything, the limiting factor in warehouses are the legs that people have. If you had people on wheels, they could go a lot faster, and that's what you see with forklifts and other kinds of material handling equipment in a warehouse. So for me, it's a bit of a head scratcher. Why would you want to replicate the human form factor in an environment that truly is optimally designed for something on wheels? And then the question, of course, is if you have a humanoid and you're using the humanoid to do picking in the warehouse, which can represent anything from 50 to 70% of the labor. So a significant portion of the warehouse is all about picking. If a humanoid is picking a product out of a shelf, what is it placing it into? Is it placing it into its backpack? Is it placing it into a cart that it then has to manually push? Or is it an entirely different system that it has to connect to? So when we think about the problem at Locus, we want to solve the problem, right? What is the best form factor to solve the problem? And we're not thinking about solving the problem by replicating the human body, right, into a robot. We're thinking about, what kind of speed does the robot need to achieve? What kind of storage capacity? What kind of height should the robot have to really solve the problem and deliver a really good ROI for the customer? So that's why I'm a little skeptical about, the role of humanoids in a warehouse. I think they still have some interesting use cases in, I would say, the edge workflows where it could move, a tote from point A to point B, or maybe it's, taking a flyer and scanning it and placing it onto a conveyor. That kind of stuff I can wrap my head around. But on the picking side, which again represents 50 to 70% of labor costs in a warehouse, I kind of struggle to see the widespread application. And what do you think?
well, I'll tell you what I think. I have two examples in my time in the last, again, I've been in supply chain innovation for over a decade, and I will never forget my first forays into what was the beginning of, this rush and this focus on recreating the human in robotic form and how difficult that endeavor is. So the first example I want to give is I remember vividly walking into one of the most sophisticated technology giants on the planet and meeting with the brightest minds in robotics in their field. This was almost 8 years ago. And they had spent 3 years modeling and training an articulating arm to grasp a bag and drop it. And in my mind, I was absolutely, it was a huge shift in how I viewed automation in general, in how monumental the most basic and tedious and mundane tasks that you and I are thoughtless.
Yeah.
We don't think about any of that. Like the tactile nature and actually what it means to pick up any object and drop it is secondhand. It's second nature, right? But for robotics companies, these are incredibly difficult tasks to train and to teach. And as each, it's this interesting evolution of technology packages that have come, which sets new baselines. So the work that team was doing, these bright and incredibly bright minds, that was foundational to the next evolution and to the next form factors of humanoids. And so from a training and modeling perspective, we've seen it grow incredibly fast, right? But that then reminds me of the application side. I will never forget my first experience in being pitched by a humanoid system and what it could do for our operations, right? Our being my former days when I was at UPS. And I was sitting in a chair, and this founder, brilliant, and I won't name names, but he comes in and he says, "We've got this system that's going to change the world. And it's not there yet, but it's coming." And by what I mean by it's coming is it's going to be better than your worst employee. And I was floored in that moment. I was like, no way. You must not know my worst employees because they're not doing much on the floor. But if your like stretch goal in life is to be better than the worst, we have got a long ways to go, right? We've got a long ways to go. And it's come a long way since then. I'm not going to completely brush aside the advancements in the space because it has been, I, like you, follow it religiously in all of the new amazing work that they're capable of doing. But like you, I always sit back and think, boy, replicating the human form factor may not be the most efficient way to accomplish all the wonderful things that these facilities are capable of and what matters to your customers, right? So
exactly.
yeah.
We launched in the process of launching a new form factor that is going to, do a lot of what the humanoid robots are promising, but it's a special built form factor called Array. And that form factor will be on wheels. It can go, beyond the 6-foot height limit of most humanoids today. It will be able to store the orders that it picks on the robot. And it's going to be able to do a whole bunch of things that's very purpose built to solve the problem. And I guess for me, I just struggle to see how, the humanoid form factor will supersede some of these new systems coming to market that are so purpose built to drive, extreme efficiency, productivity in the warehouse environment. I think other environments much more interesting for humanoids to go and solve for. But again, the warehouse environment, it's all about efficiency, wheels, and I think you'll have different form factors to better solve the problem.
Well, as an investor in Locus, I cannot wait to see it deployed, and I am so excited for your customers because it's a game changer. All right, we can't talk about humanoids, we can't talk about robotics in general without talking about the human component and the human element. And this is actually something that's very near and dear to my heart, right? Growing up in Michigan, I grew up in a automotive shop, wrenching on vehicles day in, day out. And when we think about frontline labor, and when we think about the tabloids and all of the hype around what automation is doing, there's a clear and obvious connection between, are these systems designed to displace human labor? And I would love to get your perspective on how we are thinking about labor, how you would look at it, and how you're seeing maybe some of traditional labor in modern jobs maybe be reallocated towards supporting automation, not necessarily just being straight displaced by it.
Yeah, labor will continue to play an incredibly important role, warehouses today, but also warehouses in the future. But what we're seeing as an industry is a long-term kind of switch from repetitive work to strategic work. So up until, I think the last big innovation in the warehouse was the forklift, like several decades ago, and it kind of stopped then. And now you have all of these, robots and automation solutions that can automate some of this incredibly tedious, repetitive work in the warehouse that is also many times physically exhausting. And this is what we hear from workers, day one of launching the Locus system in their warehouse. They can't believe it. They're like, "You mean I don't have to push this heavy cart for 10 miles a day?" They're like, I can't believe it. And I'm like, yes, like this is what, the future of work is all about. Instead of this incredibly physically exhausting, repetitive role that happens across, all sorts of markets, countries around the world, you now have robotics alleviating a lot of that repetitive work, that physical strain. And now they're engaging with the latest, AI-powered robots, handling multiple workflows in the warehouse, training robots, maintaining robots, So it really is the shift from repetitive to strategic work. And it comes at the right time because there's also on the backdrop of all of this rising labor shortages that we've seen getting worse and worse each year, and also rising labor costs. So it's all coming together to, I guess, evolve labor in the industry from repetitive work to strategic work. And it's no different to, what we've seen happen over and over again in other industries. You mentioned, Michigan, automotive, like the automotive industry has gone through this shift in labor many times over. I've been to, the BMW factory a number of times. You can barely see anyone on that production line doing the repetitive task of, drilling, holes and parts into the car multiple times an hour. Instead, you see people in the back of that production line helping to manage the machinery, maintain the machinery, manage the health of that production line. And that's just the shift that we're seeing now in the logistics industry at a scale that we haven't seen previously.
I think it's an important note, right? And it's an important note to look at like the market in general and actually what it takes to build automation and deploy automation. 1.5 million jobs around the globe are needed and required, and these are new jobs that are emerging to just support the sector alone that's creating automation, let alone the job opportunities that are coming from AI and machine learning type platforms that are embedded on top of these new robotic systems that will operate the modern supply chain. And I always viewed it as, again, it's very near and dear to my heart in thinking of how does the blue collar job of the future look, right? And how can we prepare a new workforce or a growing workforce to be digitally native in a way that allows them to take advantage of these systems? I view it as an enhancement. And I would say the ability to be more efficient, the ability to be safer, the ability, like as much as I love Disneyland, the idea of being on a warehouse floor and walking the equivalent of 2 Disneyland days on a day in, day out shift basis is incredible. But now with these robotic systems, it's almost eliminated that altogether, right? It makes me better at my job, so to speak. And I think that in a world where our economy continues to grow, in a world where e-commerce is relentless in its growth, we need to be more efficient.
Absolutely.
Empowering our labor force with new tools and resources and technologies to rise to that occasion it's necessary. And I'm excited to see it come to fruition. And I'm really excited when one of the things that I think is often like overlooked is people are so scared about when automation is being talked about being entered into their facilities. But when you actually go interview the grounds floor for, hey, what's your experience been like? It's a resounding, oh my gosh, I wish we had this earlier. It's actually a retention strategy for
Yes.
users and businesses that have deployed it. It almost gamifies your job, which if this is a second job or my primary career, right? The ability to make it fun, make it interesting, make it safe is something that I admire. And I think that that's how you create lasting opportunities and loyalty and retention in and amongst a labor force that's being stretched in so many directions.
Yeah,
Right?
I
So
know. Just
love your
adding
points.
on to that, at each of the sites that we've deployed, they report higher employee morale because their actual jobs and lives have been improved. And, we have all these amazing, anecdotes of people saying their back pains disappeared and their feet they don't hurt anymore because they're not walking 10 miles a day. So it really does. I know, if you're not in the industry, if you've never set foot in a warehouse, it sounds scary, right? Robots are coming and they're entering warehouses. But if you actually look at the reality of the situation, the labor shortage, labor costs, the repetitive physical strain of the jobs that happen in the industry, robots can actually really alleviate that and keep people in the process, but alleviate what is, a very difficult and strenuous job.
It is. It's physically taxing. And that, I believe, is one of, again, another like unnatural byproduct, like this huge win in how companies are looking and leaning into automation to drive value to their employees, right?
Yeah,
All
it's a strategic
right.
imperative. And we talked a little bit about warehousing, but just going back to my DHL days, I was working with one of our trucking businesses, and I think the average age, and this was like 5 years ago, the average age was like 53 of their truck drivers. So they were like, we don't know where the labor is going to come from once these guys retire. So I think, one part is, you need to do it because it's going to make your operations more efficient, your employees happier, but it's also a strategic imperative because there's other kind of labor dynamics at play where if you're not automating, you're going to be caught in a bad spot in a few years' time.
That's right. All right, so we're getting close to time here, but I wanna toss out a fun question, and specifically, I'm so eager to hear your take on this. But what's one thing that you're seeing that over the next 5 years could have the biggest and most transformative impact in the space?
I hate to say it, it's a buzzword, but it's AI. And I'd be stupid not to say AI because it is our number one priority at Locus. We're fundamentally AI, but we are so excited about the next generation, next kind of wave of AI technologies that's not only going to help us make our existing kind of product more efficient. We talked about, using data AI to drive additional productivity lift, but we're really excited about all of this AI that's being developed to make us to empower us to develop new form factors, whether that's array or other form factors that we're thinking about. It's only possible with these new advances in AI. So I think it's going to enable a lot of innovation in the industry. It's going to enable new kinds of robots that are smarter, faster, more accurate, deliver better ROI to customers. So I think that will be one of the single most transformative trends in the industry in the coming years.
I was going to do the same thing. I was also going to join you on the journey of AI. I'm going to throw agent in front of it just to spice things up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Agentic AI, right? Oh no, that's net new for many. But I would say, in my mind, AI surfaced insight. I referenced this earlier, but I think one of the most transformative moments that we will see over the next 5 years is the tools to create our own, and I say our as a collective. I'm going to speak on behalf of the user base that's out there. There's this world where the ability to create your own AI systems, your own AI tools and applications is getting easier and easier and easier. And I don't have a PhD in any form of education that would allow me to help code a new AI platform. But the tools and resources that are being created today enable me and people like Todd to go out and build in a way that allows me to take action from those insights. And to me, that's like one of the biggest, it's like the holy grail of watching how companies are evolving and transforming, is they're leaning in on that data that they've been harvesting for the last decade, and their ability to take action from it in a way that's completely rewriting the script and how they design their networks and how they operate their sites on a day in, day out basis, and how they treat their customers and interact with their customers at the most local level, because the customer is at the heart of everything. And if you can improve that experience by ensuring that there's reliability, speed to market, and making sure that they have their goods when they want them in the condition they expect them, that's everything. So I think I'm just going to add my little flair on. I think it's agentic AI and the tools that are helping people self-create those systems that will be really exciting to watch over the next 5 years as it comes to market. All right, last question, and it's a good one. You've had such a wonderful journey in and across all forms of automation, but what was the most surprising, call it statistic, or element that you've seen in your career in this space?
I'm going to mention a recent statistic because when I read it, it blew my mind. And I read it 2 weeks ago in a Wall Street Journal article. It was an article about Amazon. And for those of you who've been in the industry as long as Todd and I have, Amazon acquired this robotics company called Kiva not too long ago. We're talking like 12, 13 years ago. And in this article, they said that Amazon will soon have more robots than people across its operations. And Amazon is a massive employer. So the thought of them having that many robots and having produced and deployed that many robots in a short space of time is staggering. And then the other statistic in that article was something like 75% of Amazon's global deliveries are in some way powered by their robotics solutions. So if you think about 3/4 of all of Amazon's deliveries are through their robotics investments, it's absolutely staggering that they've achieved that in such a short space of time, and the amount of lives and people that order from Amazon and interact with Amazon, that their goods are being handled by robots. I thought that was just staggering how quickly a transformation can happen at a global scale, right?
And what a nod to when you look at their performance and as a company, their position in the market, right? They were one of the first to lean in and adopt technology in a way that we really hadn't seen many before them do. And I think it's admirable when you look at them leading the charge in doing so. I'm going to throw one out that I thought stood out to me, because I think, again, labor to me is so near and dear to my heart that I was kind of blown away. McKinsey had put out a statistic not that long ago that talked about how 60% of all jobs, every job, has at least 30% of tasks that are done in it that can be automated away in the future. But the jobs aren't going away, right? And I think, to me, that was such a standout statistic around the rise in automation. Look at how many people Amazon employs day in, day out. And yet you just said, well, they've grown their automation fleet that now is above and beyond that number. They haven't hired less. They're still growing, right? These are incredible statistics to point to the relevance of how automation is driving growth. It's not taking away jobs. And I think that when we look at the space, when we get excited about the future of e-commerce and AI and robotics and the modern supply chain, a truly modern supply chain, automation is it's a cornerstone, and it's foundational to what success will look like in the future.
Yeah,
To steal
preaching to the
words
choir
of-
here, Todd.
I know. To steal the words of our CEO and founder Hamid, he once gave a speech just where he was talking about, you're either on the tracks or you're about to get ran over by the train, right? And so I think for so many out there, that journey of just getting started is now. And I think the transformative capabilities of leaning in today and scaling solutions like Locus, solutions like Gideon, solutions like AutoStore, are really going to reshape how commerce moves. So, Gina, I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to riff with you on all things automation, AI, the future of commerce as we know it. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to doing this again.
And that's it for this episode of Moving the World. A big thanks to Gina Chung for sharing how Locus Robotics is helping to reimagine the supply chain from the ground up. For more stories from the people and technologies keeping the world in motion, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep on moving.